Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, everybody. This is Parsha Talk. I'm Avi Grossman. Today, we are very privileged to have Rabbi Alan Yuter join us to discuss this week's Parashat Vayera, and of course some other issues. Just to date this particular webcast, yesterday was the American elections for president, and as of last time I checked, which was shortly before this, we still had no clue who had won. It was almost dead even in many places, and that sort of unfortunate political instability is not something that I think is conducive to proper Jewish living. But what are you going to do? That's what God has decided, and we hope that whoever is the winner, it'll be good for us, and it'll also be the right choice. Anyways, Rabbi Yuter is here. I am very happy to introduce him. I'll first give the connection. I discovered Rabbi Yuter's writings online through his son, Rabbi Josh Yuter's writings. Rabbi Josh Yuter, longtime host of the Y Utopia or Utopia. He spells it Utopia with a Y at the beginning, so I don't know how he would pronounce it. But his very well-researched and interesting articles on all things Jewish, especially his affinity for Talmudic and intellectual honesty, was actually quite refreshing in the early days of the Jewish blogosphere. And although he has been producing less, times change, it still led me to discover his father's writings. And I eventually, a few years ago, contacted Rabbi Yuter because I had many questions, and he's always been available, always straightforward, always honest, and always ready with the sources, and also a good ear. Rabbi Yuter began his career actually, I think way back in the 1960s, his rabbinical career, and even has a few tshuvot written then, in the conservative movement, and broke with the conservative movement sometime later. Eventually, he began studying for his Orthodox ordination with none other than Rabbi Moshe Tendler, who's a professor of biology, if I'm not mistaken, also one of the longtime Rosh Yeshiva at the Rabbi Isaac Elchanan Theological Seminary at Yeshiva University. Rav Tendler, may be well, has trained many exemplary students, and of course himself is that connection to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and Rabbi Soloveitchik for the previous generation. Rav Yuter also studied for Dayanut personally for almost a decade with Rabbi Halivni, who's also well known in the academic circles here in Israel and the founder of the UTJ movement. And I believe also has smicha from Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu in the chief rabbinate. Is that correct, Rabbi Yuter?
That's correct.
Yes. So he's had a very interesting career and a lot to say on those topics. I guess the first thing we could ask Rabbi Yuter is, what was it like starting the conservative movement, and why did you leave? What do you think is the direction the movement is taking, and what can the Orthodox learn from that?
Oy.
Okay.
I was raised born into a non-observant, culturally Jewish family who belonged to a conservative temple because that's what you did in 1950s Philadelphia Jewry. This synagogue that I attended, the Har Zion Temple, was a cathedral synagogue with a Hebrew school that kind of worked. I got addicted. It was interesting, more interesting than public school, which would really be pubic school, because that's what they really taught. The messages they gave were not very nice. And the conservative movement was the only Judaism that was really available to me. Now, I lived on 57th Street. One block away on 58th Street was where one of the Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Kamenetsky of the Philadelphia Yeshiva, lived. And we looked at him, and he was very different. And they had singing all the time Friday night, and we didn't had no interchange. Now, I kept going to Hebrew school, not through the bar mitzvah. My parents wanted me to marry Jewish, not too Jewish, because that would be inconvenient. Well, I got hooked. It was interesting. I even was wearing tefillin for 1 month after my bar mitzvah. I didn't understand what the words meant, so I stopped. But I kept going to Hebrew school. And my vocabulary got decent enough to figure out what the siddur meant. So at age 15, I started putting on tefillin again. I didn't know from halakha. I said, this is what Jews did. Until when I went to Gratz College in Philadelphia, which was a Maskilic type of school, And I learned a lot of funny things. And in 1966, the American Jewish community sent me to Eretz Yisrael to learn, and that was a mistake. I ended up as an external student and learning Gemara in the Hebron Yeshiva when it was in Geula. That's what happens when you're coming to Geula. Okay. Then I went to the Hebrew University and Machon Greenberg and learned all sorts of funny things. And at the Hebrew University, I had two teachers who were amazing. Moshe Israel Tashma, a scholar of medieval halacha. Wow. I didn't know what kind of a gadol he was, but this was a gadol. And in Hebrew language, Yecheskel Edward Kutcher, who from man, was a grammarian expert. He cured me of my fear of languages. So I learned to learn the text of Hebrew and the holy works according to the pshat. If God said anything, this is what he said. And if you don't know what the words mean, you don't know how to do it. And by convention, I went to the Jewish Theological Seminary because that's the Maslul. That's what you did. But then these guys, what?
You left the Hebron Yeshiva to go back to the JTS?
I didn't go there. I was an external student. I had a chavrusa there.
Okay.
Chavrusa was the nephew of my Hebrew professor at Temple University, Ezra Shereshevsky. His brother, Ben Sion, was a judge in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. I sat and learned with the guy. And that was my ulpan, because the late Danny Shereshevsky, he didn't know English. So if we didn't communicate in Hebrew, we couldn't communicate. That's what I did instead of an ulpan. Well, and at the JTS, you had an Orthodox faculty and a non-Orthodox faculty under the same roof. Mordechai Kaplan wrote about that in Judaism as a Civilization. The conservative movement is a merger. It didn't work. Now, I didn't know anything about that stuff. But I remember I had these two professors in Eretz Yisrael, and the Orthodox faculty at JTS were Renaissance men who were frum. They were exposed to a mastered world literature. When I was studying to be a Hebrew professor, and eventually took a PhD at NYU, they were teaching Hebrew literature at JTS according to what's called the American New Criticism. The chancellor at those times was Rabbi Louis Finkelstein. He was a smart man. He had Hebrew literature taught from the perspective of American New Criticism. You study a document in isolation. It's making a statement. It's not made up of shreds. He was talking about the Bible curriculum, but not addressing it, teaching us Hebrew literature with the American New Criticism. That's how I learned to read English, Hebrew, any language. What's the document trying to say based on its internal mechanics, including the Chumash?
Like
you start with the premise as a scroll written on the inside. Now, at the JTS in 1970, they assigned me to a gentleman called Chacham Yosef Faur, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. I entered his shir in 1970 and never left. He reads Torah according to Peshat. He is an anti-Bible critic, but he knows Semitic languages. In fact, I once asked him, Mori Harab, is it worth it for me to learn Arabic? He said, no, you're too old. My professor contradicted him. Since it wasn't halacha shayla, I didn't feel bound by it. And my professor, Baruch Levine at New York University, said, you're as young as you think, go learn Arabic. Yeah. So I did. And it was helpful. For example, L'cha anu shira. The word chanu, Rayan Nun Yod in Arabic means to sing. Anu shira is to sing shira. The word amar in Arabic and Aramaic means command. Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, and Yehi Or means God commanded let there be or. If you think that's so crazy, in Shabbos you say, Siva Amar V'Yehi, Siva V'Ya Amod, parallel. Once you realize the word Amar often means command, the Tanakh means a lot more. The Torah is when God says, Vayomer Elokim Yehi Or, it's a three-part pun. The word Amaru in Akkadian means to see. The word Amar in Arabic and Aramaic means to command. In Hebrew, it means to say. God knows how to write. Now, if you don't know those other languages, you can't see the play. So yes, we study the ancient languages to understand what the Peshat is. What did God mean by what God said in the book? And it works. When the word Shalom appears in God's reference to God, it's always life eternal. Oseh Shalom ben Ramav means eternality. Birchat Kohanim is Birchat HaShalom. Shalom shebem Ramav, That's the shalom we want, aleinu. We say sim shalom to place that peace. That's the peace that's forever. Does not only mean when you lay down and get up, but when you lay down, as it is in the book of Daniel at the end, we say death, then life. Now, when you study the patterns, that's what the American New Critic studies. Now, they were very secular people, but it works in a religious book. And that's why you have to pay attention to the words. If God is a writer, as Rabbi Feldwer always teaches, you have to learn how to read. And once you know how to read, you have real chayrus, real freedom. I can ask my teacher, Ashkenazi teacher, Rabbi Tendler, anything. I could ask him. When I asked him about his Eruv, Rabbi Feinstein personally follows the Vilna Gaon's Eruv policy, but he permits it for his congregation. So I said, how can you do such a thing? He says, well, they're going to carry anyway. So did you ever tell them that it was a problem? And he said, oops, maybe I should. In other words, Rabbi Tendler also suggests, as a scientist, you have to be honest. Mitzvah sheker tirchak is also a mitzvah. And you shouldn't be afraid of the truth. And the truth sets you free, but I didn't learn that in my Bible.
Okay. You know, I started studying Arabic at the age of 35, I think. And I was...
Mazbut k'tir.
What?
Mazbut k'tir.
Yeah.
Very good.
Very happy, very happy about that also, Mabsut and all that. And also I remember learning about the Emir, which is a certain type of leadership figure in many Arabic communities. Well, a place where they speak Arabic. The Emir is the one who gets to command everybody around. So
my son's Josh's bar mitzvah, my speech was Et Hashem ha'emirecha hayom. That means you accept God as your commander this day.
Yeah.
At my son's bar mitzvah, that was my drasha.
Okay. So you discovered basically that you were in the conservative movement sort of by default, but you continued through their ordination and rising in the ranks in the conservative movement, even among the clergy.
I assumed their mythology from the get-go. It's the only. I was raised on Yechezkel Kaufman before I was introduced intelligently to Rashi. Not Rashi, but Rashi, because it's a Dagash Chazak in the Shin.
Yeah.
And we pronounce it according to the Mitzorah. Pardon me?
It should be accented on the last syllable.
That's right. That's the Dagash Chazak augments Rashi as opposed to Rashi.
Yeah.
You can't. We have a Mitzorah. It's called the Nikudot.
Yes. I always want to show people if Rashi was supposed to be accented on the first syllable, like I just said, there would have been a Tsereya, Segol, or Cholam on there. It would be Roshi, Reshi, or Reshi.
But that's right, because you have a long vowel.
Yeah. So that has to be one of those, just like the word petty or Kelly or holy. So you could have a cholam or a segel or a tzerei on the first accented syllable. But if it's not any of those, then it's not the accented syllable. So what brought you away from the conservative movement?
Well, I read what the book says, and they made the mistake of putting me on their Committee of Law and Standards.
Oh, okay.
And I said, you can't do that. It says this in the book. They said, you're crazy. Now, the fellow who was running, or the executive vice president at the time of the Rabbinical Assembly, his name was Rabbi Wolf Kelman, got very angry at me. I published in my second paper ever. You can't say you believe in Giyur Halacha if b'di avad you accept Reform Giyurim, which by their definition is not Halacha. So you can't write that. You embarrassed us. Who gave you the right to write that? I said, God. If I'm wrong, refute me. Make my day. Actually, I said, mach mein tug. And he got even angrier. If I'm wrong, refute me. That's don't you believe in intellectual discourse and honesty, scientific method?
Sorry, is that an expression in Yiddish? I know "make my day," but "mach mein tug" is just the literal translation. Do they say that in Yiddish?
I don't know.
Okay, fine.
Arabic is a Semitic language. Yiddish is an anti-Semitic language.
Yeah. They'll get me started on that one. I really don't like Yiddish. I mean, I don't like Yiddish when people try to conflate it with holiness and mitzvah observance and the Torah.
Yiddish functions as the only community today that speaks Yiddish are the Haredim.
Yeah.
And it's its way of being. It's a secular language that occupies secular time and spent, as opposed to Russian or Polish, because they're not Russian or Poles, they're Jews. And Yiddish is the language of Yidden, which is their culture. That's why they call their culture Yiddishkeit. But that's the Yiddishkeit of Y.L. Peretz is not the Yiddish of Rabbi Elyashiv.
Yes, it's
or
there.
in the Hebron Yeshiva. When Rav Tsar and I was there, they gave shiurim in Yiddish, which I at the time did not understand.
Really? Even growing up in Philadelphia, you didn't pick up some Yiddish from the earlier generation?
From the earlier generation who were non-observant, we were illiterate in every language.
Mm-hmm.
And we believed in learning, but it was hard. Where could you learn? I really don't know my school path. It was you go to Gratz, then you go to JTS if you want to continue.
Okay.
And it's nothing. I considered for a while HTC Skokie Yeshiva under Eliezer Berkovitz, but it seemed very anemic to me, so I didn't pursue it.
Okay. So I guess I have a lot more questions about that, but because we have to get onto the Parsha, I'll just suddenly jump to that, and we'll save the rest of this amazing journey, I guess, hopefully for the next time, if you'll be kind enough to join us another week. Now you say,
if you learn in Arabic, we'll say tafadal.
Okay.
By your grace.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they also would say, they used to tell me, whatever you want, tafadal. And then they say also, I was surprised by in Arabic, at least in the spoken Arabic dialect that they taught us, they said you don't say the exact time. If it's 8:16 p.m., you just say a quarter after 8. You're not supposed to say to the exact number for some reason. I don't know if that's something that's in all different dialects, but that was certainly something that's local here in Jerusalem. And I was also very disappointed. I found that, yes, they say the kuf properly, a lot of them, the way it's not supposed to be like a simple K sound or a kaf sound. But I was also surprised that there are a lot in and around Jerusalem who just don't pronounce the kuf entirely. They skip it. They make it just an aleph. Did you hear that?
Because the kuf is hard to pronounce.
Yeah. So there was
one.
Yeah.
There's one core Arabic. The core Arabic is the classical Arabic, as in the Quran.
Yeah.
And then there are other dialects. In the Latin world, once Charlemagne said you can't be saved as a Catholic if you don't say the Mass in the right dictum. So he froze Latin. Latin died because it was frozen; it couldn't develop. And other Romance languages, Portuguese, Spanish, Romanian, French, developed all over Europe because it was fixed in the in the Catholic Church. Just like the Quran was the model Arabic. It was in the Jahiliyyah, in the time before the Muhammad, the Rasul came. They had Arabic was developing. Once you have a fixed Arabic, that's one language. That's the language of television and high culture. And the colloquial Arabics, what's the word they use for it? The Koine Arabics.
Yeah.
That's all over the world. Like Jamia is a meeting in Eretz Yisrael Arabic, but Gamia is the word for me in Egyptian. They don't have a gimel instead of a gimel.
Yes, I'm surprised. I wrote an article about this. I submitted it to a place that they're supposed to have published it. I didn't hear back from them recently. So I was thinking about if they given them a deadline already, because that was whatever. It was actually quite surprising to discover that there's still Arabic dialects where the gimel was pronounced as a gimel. There are people trying to tell me, no, the Hebrew gimel is supposed to sound like a J because that's the way they do it in Arabic. I said, no, it's all wrong. It's a corruption of Arabic to pronounce the gimel as a J. Even in Arabic, it's not always a jim. It's actually a gim.
Now, in the Hebrew, we have the beged kafat letters. What does it do? With a dot, the dagesh kal, it's a stop. B, g, d. We should say higadti, not higaditi.
I know. I wrote a whole book about that.
Very good.
Okay. So now that we're on the same page, we're gonna jump into the parsha, I guess, or the parasha to be more exact. But this is Parsha Talk because my wife chose the name of the program a few years ago. Maybe you could tell me the pshat in the parsha. What does Sodom represent?
I'm going to try to explain that in my talk.
Okay, please.
Okay. Now, the Abraham narrative describes in Genesis, in Bereshit, the narratives. I don't like to call them stories because they're not stories, they're narratives.
Okay.
The narratives of Bereshit put in narrative form the hashkafa, the philosophy, the worldview of the laws. The laws and the narratives go together. Robert Cover wrote an article at Yale, Nomos and Narrative, Nomos, Law and Narrative. What do we learn about our hashkafa from the narratives of the Torah? The Bible criticism that is kosher is called the American New Criticism. We study the Chumash, which is on a scroll, which is bounded by two sides, and hafochba v'hafochba dekulaba. You find whatever you need within the finite universe of the Torah's words. Now, Sodom embodies the society that this Torah seeks to conquer. God does not take us, avodah zarah, away from us.
Okay.
The Torah is trying to teach us to make the right choice. If God wants to honor us and reward us, we have to earn it. As we have to make the right choice. You have a choice to observe the mitzvahs or not. God doesn't force it upon you. When it says kafa alav har kegegis, Rashi only says part of the midrash. The end of the midrash in Shabbos, page 88, is then it's, the Torah doesn't really count. We didn't accept it willingly. We did accept it willingly. How do I know? According to Pshat, because no one felt afraid of God at Har Sinai. We had to tell God what the response to the Israelite vote was, because we didn't feel that we were under pressure to accept the Torah. We didn't obey it any better, but we were not accepting the Torah according to Pshat in Torah, under coercion. Now, in we're told, God says to Abraham, the sin of Sodom is heavy. That idiom, the sin of Sodom is heavy, is a very important idiom. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, if you're an evil person, they weigh your heart, and if it's heavy, it's sinful, and you get no olam haba. In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the pyramid text. What God is using is an idiom from Egypt. Palestine, Eretz Yisrael, was the most northern province of ancient Egypt. And the Navi Yeshaya says it too. Hoi goy chotei am keved avon. Am keved, heavy with sin. In other words, God is saying, these guys are guilty. Okay. Now, you're going to call these guys guilty. What did they do? Why? What makes them evil? And it doesn't say, it just said they're very bad. And they're heavy with sin. Now, Abraham is the opposite. They're going to do all sorts of bad things. Abraham figures out who God is. And this God says, you're 75 years old, you're not going to retire, you're going to start a whole new career.
Yeah.
I want to go to Miami Beach. He goes to Eretz Yisrael and starts a whole new people. Why? Because in Mesopotamia, he cannot resist their culture. There's too many of them. He has to have a no man's land. Just like his descendants would have a no man's land, have a generation to recapture the Torah. Because when you live in culture, it overwhelms you. We're going to come back to that motif with regard to Lot.
Okay.
Lot is halfway between Sodom and Avraham. Avraham is a good guy. He bails out Lot from trouble. By the way, what does the word Lot mean?
It's a spice, like lotus.
Do you know what it means in Aramaic?
Aramaic, it means to curse. Well, it means
exactly.
A curse.
Layet Allah Abaye.
Yeah.
What was Lot's life like? Lot's life was interpreted by his descendant-in-law, Naomi. Ani Malaya halachti, v'rekam hashiveni Hashem. Yeah. What she's describing herself, Lot goes to the rich place, the lush place, even though it was a place, Keved Avon. Abraham gave him, go wherever you want. We just don't want to fight. Abraham is a tzaddik, and Lot is greedy. When Abraham comes out of Mesopotamia, he comes with Lot, his wife Sarai, the Lot ben Achiv. When he comes out of Egypt, he comes with his wife, with his property, and after his property, Lot. The change in order tells you Lot is revealing himself. He wants to make a lot of property. He wants to be rich. He wants the good life. Okay. Now, notice, I'm not giving any soupy dreidelach and no schmaltz. What are the facts of the pshat? And when you see the patterns of pshat, what is the hashkafa that is revealed therein? Now, this is criticism. Criticism doesn't mean I'm criticizing the stuff. It means I'm understanding it, making judgments based on the facts of the case. The real estate of Eretz Canaan can't support both of them. Avram says, no fight, take what you want. He takes the rich course. He's going to come out of Sodom with a big fat goose egg, in Yiddish, a gornish.
Yeah, okay.
Now, he's living in Job, living the good life. And God says, HaMechaseh ani me Abraham. Abraham is going to have to obey, keep the Torah. He's going to, we say in the pasuk, Ki yadativ, I know Abraham. Laman asher yisavez banav et beito acharab, v'shamru derech Hashem la'asot tzedakah u'mishpat. That is what Sodom does not do. I'm not going to go into Chazal right now. Because we say, En mikra yotzei midei pshuto. Because when God wrote the Chumash, what you see is what you get. And the rabbis do not modify that. And Pshat is what shemodim bo atzedukim. That's the Tanakh we can have in common, even with the believing Goyim. I did some work with Rabbi Riskin in interfaith dialogue. Rabbi Tendler says to me, don't you know you're not allowed to do interfaith dialogue?
Yeah.
Of course I know it. So how can you teach Chumash to the Goyim?
Oh.
And I said, what does the Rambam say about teaching Torah to non-Israelites who believe in Torah min Hashamayim? Rabbi Tendler says to me,
we need to know.
Just checking. Just checking. In other words, you go as far as the law will allow you. And you remember what Acher said to Rabbi Meir? Ad kan tchum Shabbos. You can't go any further. This is your red line. There were no red lines in Sodom.
Wait, so can I ask a question about that? If Lot left Avram Avinu and put himself in with these Sodomites, he cast his lot. See, another lot joke. He cast his lot with the Sodomites. Why did he deserve to get saved?
Why are you asking me that question? Did you read my paper before I wrote it? That's all I want to answer.
Oh, okay.
How good do you have to be to make God happy?
I don't.
If you get 50% mitzvah and 50% aveira, you pass. When I was teaching in the Hillel Yeshiva in Deal, New Jersey, I said for Gomorrah, I have a different scale. I pass you with a 50. But you get Olam Haba if you get a 50. Because God gives you the point to 51. If God's going to pass you with a 50, I got to pass you with a 50. I don't make up the rules.
Well, what did the principal say about that?
I'm going to jump ahead and answer your question because you asked the question now.
Okay.
Lot assimilated into the society. Witness, the people go around lots. They came al Lot on him. It means two, but the word is al. Whenever you have the word al in the Hebrew Bible, it means hierarchy, a hierarchical society. Someone's on top and someone's on the bottom, not egalitarian. According to our tradition, we each have the same Tselem Elokim. That means we don't get our rights because we have an agreement in Philadelphia in 1778. We have our rights because God says so. This person has Elokim, the God who gave the law, said you're all the same in my eyes. God doesn't play favorites. You get what you deserve. And Lot did deserve a lot of credit because even in Sodom, he stood up for his guests. They they came on his house. We own you. You, Mr. Angel, or they look like men. We will abuse you. We will make you submit to homosexual rape. And what does Lot do? He defends them and risks his life.
Well, yeah, but he also offers his daughters instead.
I didn't get there yet. Because he was also part of Sodom. He tried to do the right thing, and he's worthy of being saved. Remember, why did Avram do the Akedah? Why did he trust God with the Akedah? Because who surrounded Lot's house? The Anashim, Zakein, Narva Zakein, the youngsters and the oldsters. They all wanted to have fun. We're going to have fun tonight. We're going to Wang Chung tonight. Remember that rock video?
Thank God, no.
Yeah, it's a good thing. When I was once teaching in the Solomon Schechter in Rockland County, I had to know that stuff because the kids knew that better than Chumash.
Okay, so
we're going to have fun tonight.
Okay,
and that fun is the son of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Okay.
And look, and when it says we want to know them,
okay. Yeah,
the Bible is speaking Lashon Sagi Nehor with delicacy. Our response to Puskite is delicacy. We're not prudes, but we're prudent. The Torah is speaking in a language that says no to the culture of Sodom. We want to do conceptual homosexual rape on these people. No, take my daughters instead. Now, he's thinking like a Hebrew. I have to defend my ghosts. And he took a risk for his life. This is not a Russia. He's an idiot. God, Torah says Kedoshim to you. It doesn't say Chachamim to you. He's an idiot. Because he Oiler Rasha, V'Oiler Shteino. If you sit in a tub long enough, you'll soak it in. He soaked in unwittingly at Sodom. Oiler Rasha, V'Oiler Shteino. Rambam writes in Hilchos Deos, chapter 6, Adam Namshach Achar Habrios. We are social animals, right out of Aristotle. We copy, we mimic. What does Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik write about mimetic culture? We do what we do because we see people doing it. Like my practice, and I don't do Negelwasser. I do Metilas Yadayim for Shacharis, Mincha and Ma'ariv. Why? Because that's Bimkom Korban. He come the cross Elo Kefa Yisrael. Everyone's doing it. I don't care. That's what got me out of the conservative movement. What does the text say? Rav Lieberman Zal would say, what's Pshat? He wrote his book, Tosefta Kivshuta. And there was there's a fellow who recently passed away, Rabbi Nachum Rabinovich, who used that same shita on the Rambam, calling it Yad, Yudalit, the hand, the 14 books, Pishuta, spread out open hand, and according to the Pshat in the Rambam.
Yes.
In other words, these guys know. What? Yes.
I looked over here. There's a set of Tosefta Kivshuta right outside the camera here that I recently put in the base medrash, right during Tishrei. So it's over there, and the Yad Pshuta is over my right shoulder. So
you may know Tachet. That's two sides, same coin, and it's interesting how this system got to work, and you can't move without it. Because he teaches you what did the Eibishter really say to us? In other words, there was among the Orthodox faculty at the JTS, using every tool you can. In fact, I was saying a paper on Ibn Ezra and based on a machlokas between Pinellas and Geiger, an Orthodox and Reform scholar under Rabbi Zucker, Moshe Zucker, who taught Parshanut. He wanted me to do a doctorate under him to do a critique of Kirkasani, an Arab-speaking heretic. I didn't do that because I was finishing my PhD coursework already. And after 5 years of graduate school, my wife said, I go to work.
Yeah.
So I went to work. But I learned how to learn a particular way. What's the religion encoded in the Pshat? Lod had assimilated in part and remained a Hebrew in part. And he deserved to be saved. Now, what does that teach us? What do you have to do to be good? We first can't be judgmental. How does God judge people in Sefer Bereshit? How did Lot get judged the way he did? How did Cain know that murder was wrong? He didn't know he was murdering.
God told him.
That's why he didn't get it. Because the pasuk doesn't say until chapter 9 in Bereshit. Shofech dama Adam, ba'adam damo yishafech. That rule wasn't given yet. That rule against murder appears in chapter 9, Pasuk Vav. Sephardic minhag, memorize. That way it's always on your head. So we know what to do because the law says that. And if you don't have a law, the way you judge others is the way you get judged. Mishnah Sota, chapter 1, paragraph 7. The Derech Adam Moded, Bo Modedin Oto. We write our own script. The way we treat others is the yardstick, by the way, the Eibishter judges us before we get the Torah. When we get the Torah, he writes out the whole menu. in one of my early major papers, and I gave it the JLA, the Jewish Law Association in Jerusalem. The Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach have hints of them in Hammurabi's code. Hammurabi's code.
Yeah. Amraphel. Yeah.
Amraphel, exactly. And what's fascinating is, according to the Pashat Pshat, the fetus has a status of property. And you kill a Gentile for stealing, according to B'nai Noach. That's why you kill a Gentile who destroys a fetus, because it's like theft, which is an answer to Tosafot, who says, how can it be that it's stricter for a Jew than a Gentile? For a Gentile than a Jew. Same thing by Avram and Achai. A Jew eats Avram and Achai, he gets malchut, and a Goy gets death. It's Pashat Pshat. Don't be afraid of Pshat. So Abraham becomes a model of Chesed. Lot is in the middle. God still cares about Lot. Does God reject Adam and Eve after they sin? No. He takes them to Lord and tailors and gives them clothing and shows them how to use fire and how to manage in Gullus. When Cain messes up, does God reject him? No, he gives him a pep talk. Cain didn't listen. Now, when I teach the story of Cain Vehevel, I ask my students the question, how long did Cain hate his brother? As long as he was able.
Oh, that's a good one. I
also remind my Talmidim, I have a mitzvah midrabanan to say milsa de b'dichusa. It doesn't have to be funny, but I got to do it.
You have to try at least. So, but
Noah,
was
also a problem. He got out of the ark. He wasn't perfect. Does God reject Yishmael or accept him Basher Husham?
Yeah.
God is happy to have sinners. So when you say Tehillim, because what we say in Tehillim in chapter 1, pasuk 5, Ashrei ha'ish asher lo halach b'derech rishai.
Yeah.
God gives 3 grades. God judges us the way a PhD student gets judged. There are 3 grades: honors, pass, and fail. We have tzaddik, chotei, and rasha. The chotei passes. He's kam b'mishpat. He makes olam haba. Won't sit in the first row, but he's invited to the meal. He's kam b'mishpat. He gets olam haba. Now this is pshat. This was not the pshat that the JTS wanted to see. One of my last discussions at the JTS was with the late Professor Robert Gordis, who said there's no olam haba in the Tanakh. So I asked him, did you ever see the last pasuk in the book of Daniel?
It says,
That was written late. Maybe it was written late.
It's still
Tanakh. But it's in the Tanakh. And it says in chapter 12, verse 7 in Koheles, that who knows if the Tashov ha'afar el ha'aretz k'shaya v'to'aruach tashuv elokim asher nitana.
Yeah.
And we conclude with a story of my son, of Josh. Rav Josh was in Rav Tendler's shir, and my son pronounced the mapik. Rabbi Tendler says to my son, Josh, say it right. Josh said, I did.
Yeah.
So Rav Tendler says, say it according to the Masorah. To which Josh says, the mapik is a Masoretic dot.
Yeah.
Rabbi Tendler rolled his eyes. That was his punishment for adopting the Yuters as Talmidim.
Yeah. Yeah, I recall there was a similar story, like, say it normally, just say it the way everybody else says it sometimes. That's what they want to hear. But
there's a gentleman at Yeshiva University, a friend of mine, his name is Rabbi Moshe Bernstein, who says, how do you say our rabbis taught in Gemara? I said, Tino Rabbanan.
Okay.
You said, you're not a big enough Talmid Chacham to say that. You have to say Tanu Rabbanan. I said, no, he says, Shanu Chachamim Bilshon HaMishnah. It's Tino Rabbanan. And we have a Masorah. It's called Onkelos. And it's called Daniel. And it's called Ezra. We have a Masorah. You don't know it.
Yeah, it's like Chanu is Shiro and Chazo is they saw it. They're all of that same mishkal, that there's a Shva and then a Cholam. Yeah,
it's a diphthong contracting. Yeah. Like Oi is O and Ye. Oi.
Yeah.
It hurts. When people don't say the Shivana, well, I don't criticize. Whenever someone gets it right, I make a point of praising them in public. If they get it wrong, I say nothing. V'daber b'sheva chaveiro Below bignuso klal. You don't advance Torah by embarrassing people. The Rambam says you teach people when they're ready. If they're not ready, mutav shu shogegin and not mezidin. Better they should sin by mistake. But minestarosia nakeni.
Yeah.
What we did tonight was show in the book in Parashat Vayera we learn about value. You have Abraham, you have Lot and Sodom. Sodom gets condemned. We see that no one was righteous in the city. Once Avram saw that, when God's going to tell Avram, he knows he doesn't have to worry. He's angst for sure. He's a human being. That was his test.
But he's just.
But he knows God's going to work out in the end.
Yeah.
I've had a long and happy, busy life. I've done everything in my life that I wanted to do, but nothing the way I expected.
Yeah, probably. No, that's the whole thing. We have all these big plans, but how are we supposed to plan anything?
I was in this conservative synagogue of my youth, Har Zion Temple. I saw a commentary on the side called Onkelos. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what Aramaic was. I was a 15-year-old. At about the time I started putting on tefillin again at 15.
Okay.
In the conservative movement, there were people 150 years ago who were semi-observant in the conservative community in those days. Happened. They asked me why, when my parents moved out of the neighborhood, they asked me, did I ride to the synagogue? I said, no, I walked 3 miles to the nearest conservative synagogue. And those rabbis who didn't observe that rule, they got disdain from me. I was not a popular guy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be willing to be, before you have Yiras Adam, you have to have Yiras Shamayim a little bit. And God didn't take the blinders off my eyes because I wasn't ready to make the switch yet. When I was ready to make the switch, I said, aha, these strange things are happening. Red Skell.
Yeah.
Comedian of the 60s.
Yeah.
You just don't see it because you have tunnel vision. You just don't see it. So it's not there. It's not in your field of vision.
I understand. Yeah.
I'm a slow learner. I just didn't see it.
So I have a few more questions, but we've gotten to that point where I have to sign off for this thing. So you know what? I'm going to put them in the email over here. And I'd like to thank you for your time and your insights. And like I said, there's more to say here. Everybody, Rabbi Yuter's going to give me some links that I'm going to include in the description under the video when we post this to YouTube, because I don't have anything for right now. But I also ask those who are viewing this and will be viewing this, if you have any questions or comments, please send them in. You can send them in directly to me. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Wait, hold on. Rabbi Yuter, do we still have you on the feed?
I'm here.
Okay. It looks like I got frozen for a second. So don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Send in your questions or comments. And we'd like to thank Rabbi Yuter once again for joining us. And we look forward to next time. Everybody, even though it's only the fifth night of the week, normally we do this the 6th night of the week, but we're busy tomorrow. So I'd like to wish everybody an early Shabbat Shalom, and to have a happy continuation of the month of Mar Cheshvan, and hope that whatever is in store for us, it's only for the good. Thank you very much.